Beautiful. All right, listen. So the Bible doesn't tell us what this guy's name is. And that's a problem. Like, I think we struggle with that as people. We really like names. Names give people like character. They give people like, if you meet a certain person like with a certain name, like certain things about them. Like my mother-in-law is named Edith. You know how old that woman is if I just say Edith, right? On the other hand, like if you meet a Khaleesi, you know that child was born in like 2014. Like that's just how it works. Like we really like names, and this person doesn't have the name. The Bible doesn't care. It is interesting how little the Bible cares about names. Like Peter has like 4 of them. He has 3, but like he has 3 names, and they just use them interchangeably. And like we're supposed to know that Cephas is Simon is Peter, and like it's just a whole thing. So the Bible doesn't care about this guy's name. But we do as people. Like later on, we've decided that we care about names. So there's this guy, and the church has over time given him multiple names, given him a plurality of names. There's for example, there is Simeon Bacchus. That's a name they kind of just made up, but there it is. There's another guy just named that they cut the Simeon off and they just call him Bacchus. They spell it differently though, so that way it feels a little fancier, you know. There's a few different names, but the Russian Orthodox Church has given this guy a name, and it's my favorite one. It's what we're going to be calling him from now on. He needs a name, and the Russian Orthodox Church has told us his name is Dion Dorada, which sounds like a bullfighter or a line of Chevy trucks. Dion Dorada is what we're going to call this guy. That's obviously the name I'm going to go with. Also, when I write my movie that's a science fiction opera, I'm going to go ahead and the title protagonist will be Dion Dorada. And you guys will get it when you see the movie. Dion Dorada is the guy's name. So Dion Dorada was an extremely important man a couple thousand years ago. He was, in fact, the treasurer of Ethiopia. And if you think like, really, like he was the one guy who was in charge of all the money in a country, yes, that was his job. He was like the right-hand man to the queen of Ethiopia. He was maybe the most important person because you know how like royalty is. Like they have the title, they have all of that, but they don't really do anything, right? Like they're just sort of like a fancy hat. Like they're there to look good and make it, have a hat, but I don't know. The hat, that wasn't a good illustration. Scratch the hat thing. He probably ran the country because he did all the money. That's the point. And because of that, and because I just referred to him as a he, and I said he was the right-hand man to the queen, that also meant that he had this interesting personality trait. Dion Dorada was a eunuch. And if you don't know what a eunuch is, go ahead and Google that. Let you guys be aware. It makes sense, right? Like, it totally makes sense because look, I know that we want to live in this fairy tale world where men and women don't do the things that men and women do. And then the Michigan football team happens, and we're all just like, well, one guy thought that was funny. I love that. Perfect. The Michigan football team happens, and suddenly we realize, oh, yeah, that is how men and women are, right? That is how this operates. And so they understood that back in the day, and the last thing you want is a queen who has, let's say, an heir that it's not really an heir. And so what they would do is they would take the men who were going to work with the queens and they would castrate them and make sure that temptation was all the way gone. Not ideal if you're a man. However, there's good and bad in everything, in this world. There's upsides, there's downsides. The downside is you're castrated. The upside for Dion Dorada was he now had access to a whole different world he wouldn't have had before. Right, he gets education no one else in his nation has because now he has access to the upper echelon of the royal family. Right now, he has an ability to have a job with money. Now he has wealth beyond his wildest dreams, and with wealth came freedom. Now he has freedom that no one else in his nation has. And all of that is very important because that is why the story happens that we have. See, because we meet Dion Dorada when he is traveling from one country to another. And I got to tell you, this is not a thing that happened back in the day. Like, even think about Jesus. Jesus in his whole life is always in Israel. Except that one time when he has to go to Egypt when he's like a baby with his family and they're refugees and they're all that, like, but that was obviously not an ideal situation. They didn't want to go to Egypt. It's not like Joseph and Mary woke up one day and said, "Let's go on a trip to Egypt." That's not how that happened. They were escaping tyranny. So basically, in the ancient world, if you're going to just travel from country to country, it's almost always bad news. You don't go and then come back because it's fun. But Deandorata did. He had the money, he had the power, he had the influence, he had the connections. He could do anything he wanted to do. As long as the Ethiopian queen was happy, as long as the treasury was doing fine, as long as all that was taken care of, he was fine. And so Deandorata took a trip to Jerusalem, from Ethiopia to Jerusalem. And he did this, we're told, in the story, because he was worshiping in Jerusalem. And that is fascinating. Because at the end of the day, what we need to understand is that as we think about the ancient world, yeah, everybody kind of stays home unless it's something bad. Nationalistic identity was everything in the ancient world, and it impacted everything, and it impacted religion. And what I mean is when you read the Bible, you read the Old Testament, you can find like a country, and then you can read about their gods, and then you find another country and you read about their gods. You find another country, you read about their gods. It's religion, God, what you worship, who you worship, is always connected to where you live. And yet Deandorata lived in Ethiopia and worshipped the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He worshipped the Jewish God. And the question has to be asked, why? There's a couple answers to that. We don't know. Obviously, like the Bible doesn't tell us, and so we kind of just have to speculate. And there's a couple options. Some are better than others, but they're all sort of interesting. If I were making a movie about Deandorata, the sci-fi space opera, Deandorata, and I was trying to tell his story, I would go with the one that's really unlikely. And that is this. It's really unlikely that Deandorata was a Jewish man living in Ethiopia. It's possible. But it's really unlikely. It's a good story if it is, right? Because somehow he would have had to go from Israel to living in Ethiopia. And then he would have had to figure out how he would ascend the ranks of Ethiopian culture until he was, I don't know, just so good at math or something that they said, "You're in charge of all of our money." Like, it's happened. That's actually kind of the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. But it's really unlikely for such a thing to happen. And it would have probably started with slavery. It would have started with a lot of different things. Look, it could have happened. Probably not. What probably actually happened was that Deandorata has the freedom to travel, which means he has the freedom to meet new people. And in fact, it's probably part of his job to meet new people and talk to other people and learn about different cultures and be kind of an emissary between, Ethiopia and these other nations and empires. And what probably happened was Deandorata met some Jewish people, and he thought they were neat. And the Jews weren't like great evangelists. They didn't usually like just go around telling people, "Hey, you should be Jewish." But if, you ask somebody, "Hey, why do you like the thing you like?" It doesn't matter how evangelistic you are, you'll tell people. And it seems incredibly likely that Deandorata just met some Jewish people. He liked them. He liked how they lived. He liked how they worshipped. And he asked them, "Hey, what's going on?" And they told him about their unique way of looking at God, which involved monotheism. Nobody else was monotheistic. And so they told him about monotheism. They told the old stories, the Old Testament of all the Jewish history. And he just kind of fell in love. He probably was, 40 and, midlife crisis. And, today he'd have bought like a car. But back then it was find a new religion. And so, he just, look, he has the freedom to do it. And the beauty of his life then is he has the time, the money, the energy, the intellect, all of that. He has the ability to dive headfirst into this new hobby of his. Right? Like, he has the ability to just, like, most people in the ancient world, like, you didn't really have time to, do puzzles or whatever. Like, you didn't have a chance to have a hobby. But this guy, he is privileged enough, he can have any hobbies he feels like. And so he dives headfirst in, and suddenly he is a man who is worshiping this God from this other religion, this other culture, this other people group. And so we meet him. He'd been in Jerusalem, he had been worshiping, and now he is on the road back home. And as he's traveling, he's riding in a chariot, and they're going slow. I mean, they're not like, it's not like you see in like TV where they're just like racing down the road. Like, that's a good way to kill a horse. So, like, they're going slow. He's riding in comfort. He's a super rich guy. All he wants is just a nice, relaxing trip home. And he's got with him a scroll. Now, the scroll is actually what we call the book of Isaiah. It's a part of the Hebrew scriptures, and he has something that basically no one else would have had because it's expensive, right? You don't like go to like ancient Jewish people and they just have like a Bible sitting in their house or a bunch of scrolls sitting around. It's not how it works. It's expensive. It's time consuming to get it. A copy. It's a guy copying. You don't like print something off. Like, it's literally handwritten, and so it's just nothing that anybody else has. But again, he has money. He has privilege, he has time, he has connections. It's entirely possible. He said, hey, how much for that scroll? And they said, it's not for sale. And he said, you bet it is. Name your price. I got a blank check here. Tell me how much it would cost for me to walk away with that. And, the priest said, some outlandish number, and he did it. And that's how he is. So he's got this scroll, and he's riding home, and he's reading. And now is when I tell you that there's a lot of differences between the ancient world and us. And I always love thinking about like how we are just so connected to everybody throughout history, right? That like we are just the same as people 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 50 years ago. We want to pretend like we're advanced, but we're not. Like, just people are people. But sometimes we've got these crazy differences. And now I'm going to tell you that in the ancient world, everybody had serial killer behavior. Because in the ancient world, every single person who read out loud. Can you imagine? Like a waiting room. Just everybody just reading out loud. Actually, you don't have to imagine that because everybody's out with phones now. Guys, if you're in a waiting room, I am begging you to turn your volume down. It's the worst at like a hospital. Like, this guy over here, I've been spending a lot of time at the doctor recently, okay? You go, like, you're in a waiting room, and, like, these people are getting horrible news. And somebody over here has got a TikTok video going on with, like, a dog and a squirrel. Turn your volume down. I'm begging you. But see, in the ancient world, they couldn't because they all read out loud. Everybody read out loud. And so DeAndrada he's in his cart and he's reading out loud, and he's reading the book of Isaiah. And this is what he's reading. Luckily, we have what he's reading. We don't have his name, but we have what he's reading. This is what we read in the gospel, not the gospel, in the book of Acts and also the book of Isaiah. This is what he was reading. We read, he was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb is silent before the shearers, he did not open his mouth. He was humiliated and received no justice. Who can speak of his descendants? For his life was taken from the earth. Isaiah 53 is called the suffering servant passage. Very famous passage. It's actually much less famous and significant today than it was back then. Because back then, there was a massive debate as to who this person might be, or people might be. You see, they looked at this passage. Isaiah is this prophet. He's talking about this servant who, through his own pain and agony and suffering, will bring people to God. Right? That the bad stuff that nobody wants goes hand in hand with the good stuff everybody wants. Everybody wants to know God. Nobody wants to suffer. And those two things kind of come crashing and colliding. And ancient Jewish people wondered, what are we talking about here? Who are we talking about? Is it a prophet? Is it a king? Is it a priest? Is it, who is this? And actually, because it was such a kind of a controversial topic, there was part of the default position was maybe it's just a metaphor. Maybe we're not talking about an individual. Maybe we're just talking about the nation of Israel as a whole. Remember, the people of Israel were told that they were supposed to be a blessing to the whole world. And maybe they'll be a blessing to the whole world as they suffer, right? Maybe that's what it is. Nobody was totally sure, but Deandorata, having time and have been able to dive into, his new hobby and this new religion that he's part of, that he wants to be a part of at least, he's part of the conversation. He wants to know, hey, what is this? What's going on? And so he's reading out loud, and he gets to this part, and suddenly he's walking by, and he's riding by, and they're going really slow, and somebody who's walking or standing, we're not totally sure, but there's a guy who's there by his cart all of a sudden, and he says, hey man, do you know what that means? This is the benefit of everybody reading out loud. Not so great when you're reading, 50 Shades of Grey. Very good when you're reading the Bible. Maybe we should all read out loud. Keep us all accountable. I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry. This is what happens when I have a sermon series. The jokes get weirder and weirder. What were we talking about? Deandorata is like, yeah, I have no idea what's going on. Do you? And the guy is like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to talk to you about this. That would be fantastic. And so he's like, yeah, come on up into the into my chariot. Like come in, you can ride with me. Which, if you think about the audacity of a guy that rich to pick up a hitchhiker, like it only happens if you're that rich, right? Like, because you'll be fine. You'll be all right. So he picks up the hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker, as it turns out, is a guy by the name of Philip. Philip, as it turns out, is a Christian. I'm not sure if Deandra had heard of those people or not, but he was very interested. And Philip's like, let me tell you who that guy is. I know exactly who that guy is. He told him the story of Jesus. He told him the story about an unwed teenage virgin girl who got pregnant with God in the flesh. He told him the story about how that baby was born and that they had to go to Egypt to escape Herod. And they came back and he lived a normal life for 30 years or something. And he told him about John the Baptist and about the kingdom of heaven being at hand and on its way, and how this guy had been baptized and then began a ministry. He told them about the miracles, the feeding of thousands of people. He told them about, the healing the sick and casting out demons. He told them about how you can control weather, right? Like there was just seemingly nothing this guy couldn't do. He told him about how he'd been betrayed by one of his very closest friends, how he'd been arrested, how he'd been, taken to a trial that wasn't really a trial. It was just a game. It was a sham. It was not a trial. It was a trial, air quotes, He told him about how he'd been crucified on a Roman cross. Told him about how everybody thought it was over. Because even though he had talked about how it wouldn't be over, that people are really bad at listening. He told him about the resurrection. He told him how everybody was excited that the guy was back, but then also he left again, which is unfortunate. He told him about the church and how they were carrying on his mission, that they were trying to live the way that this guy had lived. And they were trying to carry out the message that this guy had had. And he told them about their history, how on the very first day, 3,000 people had been baptized. How the second day, a couple thousand more. How they'd grown and how they were all living to the best of their ability the way that Christ would want them to. And Philip told him all about Jesus, and he connected all the dots from not just that passage in Isaiah, but probably most of the scroll. They're going through verse by verse. And at a certain point, Deandorata interrupts him and says, hey, there's water over there. What's stopping me from getting baptized right now? And that's a good question. And it's a question that probably came from a place of insecurity and a place of pain. And it probably came from a place that he doesn't talk about much. See, because here's the deal. When you're a successful person, after you've gone through something traumatic, sometimes the last thing you want to do is ever go back to that traumatic place. Just keep pushing forward, keep pushing forward, keep pushing forward. And the one problem with Deandra and Judaism was he couldn't do that. Back home, there is no one more powerful than him, maybe not even the queen. But at the temple, there was nobody lower than him. The book of Deuteronomy specifically and explicitly barred any eunuch from worshiping in any assembly of Israel. It is cruel how vague this is. Because you think of the temple, well, of course, not the temple. What about a synagogue? Of course, not the synagogue. What does it mean to be in the assembly? We're talking about like where 2 or 3 are gathered? Yeah, probably. It was written in such a vague way that you could exclude someone all the time. And look, I get it. The Jews are very interested in sexual purity for the reasons that they were, and they were good ones. And a eunuch cannot unbecome a eunuch. I'm not sure if we have that technology today. Certainly they didn't then. And so he was a sexual abomination in the eyes of the Jews. He could read, he could study, he could pray, he could do everything he wanted to do. He could be the most knowledgeable person about Judaism on the planet, and he still couldn't come to the temple and worship. Now, maybe he had been, maybe he wasn't telling people, or maybe he was just paying off the right people, right? But at the end of the day, he would have understood that he was always an outsider, and he was never not going to be an outsider when it came to Judaism. When he asked, what's stopping me from getting baptized right now? What he was asking is, am I welcome in your faith? And look, I don't know if Philip had to think about it. I don't know if Philip, I don't know what answer other people would have given. Like maybe Philip is here specifically because of the answer he ends up giving, and there were other people that would have said, well, I don't know. But Philip does not, the Bible doesn't tell us he, hesitated. Philip is like, there's absolutely not one thing that's stopping you from getting baptized. You believe in Jesus, you're welcome, done. You want to do it? Let's go do it right now. It's right there. You said it's right there. Let's go. And Deandra is like, oh my goodness, yes, please. Please and thank you. Philip baptized him right by the side of the road. And Deandra went home. Church history tells us that he's the origin of one of the oldest churches in the known world, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. We can't totally be known for sure. But suddenly there's a very powerful man who has heard the gospel and embraced it in a place that lots of folks hear the gospel and embrace it. It's not hard to do 1 and 1 meaning 2. It's one of my very, very favorite stories in the whole Bible. I hadn't preached it all year, so here we go. On its own, it's phenomenal. I love all the little details of what life must have been like for this guy. I love the conversation about, all the conversations we can have about, what does it mean to be privileged, right? If you have money, wealth, power, all of that, education, but you also have this thing, right? You can be, there can be bigotry for everybody, on every side. And then you can explore what the Jews were doing, why the Jews were doing what they were doing, why they felt the way that they felt. Just a million directions you could go. But at the end of the day, what I love about this story is just this. All actually means all. Everybody actually means everybody. Jesus died for everybody. Jesus died for us all. Everyone is welcome. The gospel is universal. And anyone who says, hey, why can't I become a Christian? The answer is always, there is not one thing holding you back. And Philip dramatically teaches us this. But that's not why I brought it up today. I bring it up today to ask this question. Philip is just hanging out on a road on the way to Africa. And the question is, what is he doing? Why is he on this road? That question becomes really important when we read this verse. This is what we read in the book of Acts chapter 6. It's going to sound like it's going to seem like a stupid verse, but here it's important. It says, they chose the following: Stephen, a man of faith in the Holy Spirit; Philip, that's our guy; Procurus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas of Antioch, an earlier convert to the Jewish faith. And you're like, cool, Drew, now we're in the book of Numbers, just reading off names. I know, let me give you the context. Those are the first deacons of the church. Those 7 guys. First deacons of the church. There was a problem in the church. There was there was some widows who needed to be fed, and it wasn't going well. They had this whole project, and so the apostles are like, "Hey, we want to put together a team of people who are really responsible to make sure that this all works out." They find 7 people, and here we go. Philip. What I'm saying is, Philip had a ministry in Jerusalem. Philip was one of the most important people in Jerusalem in the church. There would not have been a day that went by that Philip was not needed in his service to the church. So what is one of the most important people in the Jerusalem church doing on a road to Africa? Particularly after we started with that random piece of information that is not so random with this, that people don't just travel out of the country for fun. This is not a mysterious question. There's an actual answer to this. So let's read that actual answer. In the book of Acts, one more time, chapter 8. A great wave of persecution began that day, sweeping over the church in Jerusalem. And all the believers, except the apostles, were scattered through the regions of Judea and Samaria. A verse later, Saul was going everywhere to destroy the church. He went from house to house, dragging out both men and women to throw them into prison. But the believers who were scattered preached the good news about Jesus wherever they went. Philip had been one of the most important people in Jerusalem. And then all of that ended one day when the not yet Apostle Paul decides he wants to eradicate Christianity. The apostles stay home. Everyone else leaves. Which is to say, Philip's ministry in Jerusalem ended. It had a definite end. And there had to be, if you can put yourself in his shoes, you are a Christian in this church, in this movement. You are one of the most important people. You were selected by the guys who hung out with Jesus for 3 years. You were selected by them to do this. You have a job to do, and one day, overnight, it's done. How would you feel? What would you think? I mean, you'd probably grieve and mourn what you'd lost, but you'd also probably think, man, what in the world happens next? And the answer is, if you're Philip, your greatest work still to come. Philip's greatest work was not in Jerusalem. It was not as a deacon. It was as an evangelist baptizing people like Deandorata or Simon the sorcerer or any number of other Samaritans that he baptized. Philip has a large ministry. But none of that could happen without his old ministry ending. This is the last Sunday of 2025. And maybe for you guys, 2025 is not a friend that you will miss. It's entirely possible this year was not your finest hour. It's also entirely possible that you loved this year. That, man, you don't want it to end. What a fantastic year this has been. Either way, it's over. Either way, we're done with that now. In like 4 days or something. 2026 will come. And this is a really obvious point, but every beginning only happens because another beginning ended. Like there was a beginning, and then there's an end, and now there's a new beginning. Right? It's sort of like there's no resurrection without a death. There's no new life if there is still old life. Like there's a lot of this imagery in the Bible. There's a lot of like it's kind of the core of who we are, right? We are a new creation. Which means the old has gone, the new has come. Like you keep quoting verses all the time, right? We have passed from death to life. We can just keep going. But the reality of the situation is this: if you're Philip, if you put yourself in the shoes of Philip, it would have been devastating that his ministry as a deacon was over. I can't even imagine how honored and how privileged and how incredible I would have felt to have that kind of ministry in the Jerusalem church. And I cannot even imagine the devastation when it was over. And yet, what was to come was better. And I'm not saying 2026 is going to be better than 2025. Guys, I'm not a health and prosperity preacher. I'm not sitting here telling you like, oh, the rest 26 it's your year. Just plant the seeds of your money in the offering basket, and the Lord will rain down blessings. That's not me. That's all nonsense. I mean, maybe it's not all nonsense. It's all nonsense. That's all nonsense. You don't pay God for blessings. I don't know how we got to that point. Like over and over in denominations. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's a whole rant. We get mad at the Catholics for doing it like 800 years ago. We do it yesterday. Anyway, okay. But if you're Philip, the reality was God had been with Philip when he was a deacon. And then God was with Philip when he was an evangelist. And God was with Philip in between. Because at the end of the day, this is what I can promise you. God was with you in 2025. And God will be with you in 2026. Because that's how God is. And the story of Philip teaches us that's how God is. God is with us in good times and in bad, when we are at our highest, when we are at our lowest, when we are having victories, when we're having defeats, when it's all our fault, when it is all us being victims because it's somebody else's fault. God is with us through all of it. And Philip teaches us that. And so as we end this year, I'm not in a sermon series. As we end this year, I got one last thing to tell you, and it's the thing I've been saying over and over and over. At the end of the day, I do not know what next year will bring. I have no idea. Maybe it's just nothing. Maybe it's all just a continual rolling thing and we made up the concept of calendars and who cares. But either way, God has been with you, God is with you, and God will be with you. And that is the last message I want to share with you in the year of our Lord, 2025. So, last sermon of the year, last lesson. Behind me, it says this: God has always been with you, God is with you now, and God will be with you in what's to come. God has always been with you, God is with you now, and God will be with you in what's to come. We offer an invitation each and every week because at the end of the day, everybody's welcome, everybody's invited, and nothing can stop anyone from being baptized. Bible teaches we should repent and be baptized. Sounds like two things, it's really just one. Basically, it's turning to God and wanting to be part of Him forever. Never made that decision? We got a baptistry. Let's do it. If you're already an immersed believer in Christ, you're looking for a perfect church home, this is not here. But we do serve a perfect God. We want to connect. We want to call. We want to cultivate. We want to meet new people, share the gospel, grow up while we do it. And we want to be people who understand that God is with us no matter what and seek out where we can serve others and love others and do what Philip did. Keep going no matter how many things end. As we stand,